It starts as entertainment. That's the part people don't like to admit. Before anything physical happens, before teeth or blood or screaming, there's a crowd that has already decided this is something to watch. Phones come out early. Someone cracks a joke. Someone else dares another to get closer. The setup matters more than the act itself because the cruelty is already complete in their heads. Public spectacles don't need stages anymore. A fence, a yard, a rumor, that's enough. Once people believe they're watching something forbidden or extreme, empathy shuts off fast. The person in front of them stops being a person and turns into a role. The villain, the sacrifice, the lesson. Language shifts first. Names disappear. Pronouns get sharp. It's easier to cheer for harm when you don't have to acknowledge a face. The crowd tells itself a story to feel clean about what's coming. They say she deserves it. They say it's justice. They say it's not their decision anyway. Responsibility gets passed around like a hot object nobody wants to hold for long. One person wouldn't do this alone, but together they feel invisible, safe, untouchable. Hunger adds to the theater. Starving K9s aren't just dangerous, they're symbolic. Controlled animals pushed past their limits become proof, in the crowd's mind, that what happens next is natural, inevitable. That's just how dogs are, someone mutters, as if starvation didn't turn the key, as if humans didn't design the whole scenario down to the minute. What makes it worse is how ordinary the setting feels. This isn't a battlefield. There's no sirens screaming nonstop, no dramatic music, just sunlight, dust, heat, and people leaning on their heels like they're waiting for a bus. Violence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it clears its throat politely and waits for everyone to settle in. The laughter is the loudest tell. Not nervous laughter, not shocked laughter, comfortable laughter. The kind that says the crowd feels in control. When someone yells that line, the one meant to turn a human being into meat, it lands because everyone already agreed silently. The words don't create the cruelty. They confirm it. This is how mobs work without calling themselves mobs. No leader, no plan written down, just shared permission. Each person gives a small nod to the idea that whatever happens next isn't their fault. Someone else pushed her. Someone else unlocked the gate. Someone else trained the dogs. Someone else said the first ugly word. The spectacle feeds on distance. Physical distance from the victim. Emotional distance from consequences. Moral distance from responsibility. The farther away those feel, the louder people get. They shout because shouting makes the moment feel less real, like a game show or a clip online that can be scrolled past later. Even the ones who feel uncomfortable stay quiet. Silence blends in. Silence doesn't get singled out. Silence lets people tell themselves they didn't participate, even though their presence adds weight, adds pressure, adds approval just by standing there. A crowd doesn't need everyone to be cruel. It only needs most people to be passive. What's terrifying is how fast this can form. No uniforms required. No ideology spelled out. Just boredom, resentment, and the promise of watching something extreme. Once the crowd locks into that mindset, it becomes impatient. It doesn't want questions. It doesn't want delays. It wants payoff. It wants motion. It wants to see if the story in their heads matches what happens when the gate opens. And right there, in that stretch of seconds before anything irreversible, the spectacle is complete, the cruelty fully assembled, the crowd leaning forward, breath held, eyes fixed, already satisfied with what they believe they're about to witness unfold in front of them. Dehumanization doesn't start with violence. It starts with permission. Permission to stop seeing someone as fully human, even for a moment. Once that switch flips, everything that follows feels easier, lighter, almost justified. People don't wake up wanting to watch someone be torn apart. They wake up wanting to feel right, powerful, entertained, or absolved of their own anger. The first thing that disappears is the name. A name creates friction. A name forces memory, history, relationships. So it gets replaced. She becomes that woman, the problem, the example. Language shrinks her until she fits neatly into whatever story the crowd needs. When people stop saying who someone is, they start saying what they deserve. Then come the labels. Dangerous, weak, guilty, worthless. Each one strips away another layer of humanity while pretending to add clarity. Labels are efficient. They save time. They stop questions before they form. If she's already been defined as less, then anything done to her feels like a correction instead of an assault. Humor plays a role too. Cruel jokes soften the edges. They turn tension into laughter and fear into entertainment. When someone laughs, the room relaxes. When the room relaxes, resistance fades. Humor is how people rehearse violence without admitting they're doing it. It's easier to laugh at a threat than to confront what it says about you for enjoying it. Distance helps the process along. Physical distance, emotional distance, moral distance. A fence, a uniform, a role. Anything that separates us from her. The farther away she feels, the easier it becomes to imagine outcomes without consequences. She stops being someone who will suffer and becomes something that will happen. Authority seals the deal. Someone in charge nods. Someone official doesn't intervene. The absence of objection feels like approval. People look to power for cues, and when power stays quiet, cruelty feels endorsed. Silence from authority doesn't slow dehumanization. It accelerates it. There's also the story of inevitability. The crowd convinces itself that what's about to happen can't be stopped, that this is how things always go, that resisting would be pointless or even dangerous. Once violence feels inevitable, compassion feels naive. People don't want to be the only ones standing in the way of something everyone else has already accepted. Fear gets twisted into justification. Fear of disorder. Fear of losing control. Fear of being next. When fear takes over, empathy looks like weakness. The crowd tells itself that removing her restores balance, even if nothing about the situation actually improves. Fear doesn't need logic. It just needs an outlet. The body language changes before the violence does. People lean forward. Shoulders relax. Eyes sharpen. It's the posture of spectators, not participants, which is exactly the point. Dehumanization allows people to feel uninvolved while still enjoying the outcome. They're watching, not doing. Even though the watching is what gives the act its power. What makes this stage so dangerous is how ordinary it feels. No shouting yet. No blood. Just assumptions being traded like facts. Justifications stacking up quietly. Each one makes the next easier. By the time the first physical act happens, the moral decision has already been made and buried under a pile of reasons. Even those who feel a flicker of doubt struggle to hold on to it. Doubt requires effort. Doubt requires standing apart. And standing apart means becoming visible. It's safer to let the moment carry you than to interrupt it. Dehumanization thrives on that safety, on the comfort of blending in. The final step is emotional numbing. Once she's no longer seen as someone who feels pain the way others do, suffering becomes abstract. People talk about outcomes, not experiences. Damage, not agony. Consequences, not terror. This emotional flattening is what allows extreme acts to feel routine. By the time the gate opens, or the order is given, or the first step forward is taken, the violence itself almost feels secondary. The real harm has already been done in the minds of everyone watching, because the moment a person is reduced to an object, a lesson, or a spectacle, there's very little left to protect them from whatever comes next, and that realization settles in quietly as the crowd waits, convinced they are about to witness something necessary rather than something unforgivable. Fear is the engine that keeps the whole thing running. Not just her fear, but theirs. The crowd's fear wears better clothes, hides behind jokes and authority, but it's there all the same. Fear of losing control. Fear of appearing weak. Fear of standing alone when everyone else has already chosen a side. The moment fear enters the scene, it stops being a feeling and starts becoming a tool. Someone introduces it on purpose. A warning. A threat. A display meant to show what happens if you step out of line. Fear works best when it's visible, when it has teeth and noise and weight. Starving K9s are perfect for that. They don't need to be explained. Their bodies do the talking. The crowd absorbs that fear and reshapes it. Instead of asking why this is happening, they ask what happens if it doesn't. Fear narrows thinking. It collapses options until only one path feels safe, even if that path is brutal. When fear is high, restraint feels risky and cruelty feels preventative. People tell themselves they're not enjoying this. They're just tense, just alert, just realistic. Fear gives them cover. It lets them lean into the moment without admitting the thrill that comes with power over someone else's fate. Fear blurs the line between protection and punishment. Fear also creates urgency. There's no time to slow down, no time to question details, no time to change course. Everything feels like it has to happen now. Delays feel dangerous. Interference feels reckless. Anyone who hesitates becomes suspicious, like they might be siding with the wrong person. Once fear takes hold, it spreads fast. You can see it in how people look at each other, searching for confirmation. Is this okay? Are we safe? Are we together in this? Shared fear bonds people tighter than shared values ever could. It creates instant loyalty built on survival instincts instead of principles. The crowd starts mistaking fear for wisdom. Calm voices sound foolish. Compassion sounds naive. Anyone who suggests another option gets labeled as someone who doesn't understand the danger. Fear frames itself as experience, as insight earned the hard way, even when it's based on exaggeration or outright lies. What makes fear such an effective weapon is how it shifts blame. If something terrible happens, fear gets credit for the decision. We had no choice. It could have been worse. We were trying to prevent something. Fear becomes the excuse that cleans the blood off people's hands before it even spills. Fear also isolates the victim completely. Her fear is visible, immediate, raw. Theirs is abstract and collective. That difference matters. When one person is visibly afraid, and the group claims to be afraid too, the group's fear is treated as more important, more legitimate, more deserving of action. Even silence becomes fear-driven. People don't speak up because they don't know who might turn on them next. Fear teaches obedience quickly. It rewards compliance with safety and punishes resistance with attention. The crowd learns the rules without them ever being spoken. Fear keeps people focused on the dogs, the threat, the spectacle, anything except the moral line being crossed. It directs attention outward, away from responsibility. As long as fear is loud enough, conscience has to shout to be heard, and most people don't like the sound of their own conscience when it contradicts the group. There's also fear of regret, twisted into something darker. People convince themselves they'll regret stopping this more than they'll regret allowing it. They imagine future chaos, future blame, future consequences that justify present harm. Fear reaches forward in time and drags imagined disasters back into the moment as proof. As the tension builds, fear sharpens into anticipation. Heart rates rise. Breathing changes. The crowd feels alive, alert, connected. That physiological rush gets mistaken for righteousness. Fear doesn't just motivate action, it rewards it chemically, making the moment feel important, even meaningful. And the most dangerous part is how fear disguises itself as necessity. Once that happens, anything done in its name feels unavoidable. Fear doesn't ask permission. It demands compliance. It frames cruelty as defense and silence as wisdom. It convinces ordinary people that standing still is safer than stepping forward, that watching is smarter than intervening, that whatever happens next is not only expected but required as the crowd braces itself. Eyes fixed on the threat, they've been taught to fear more than the harm they are about to allow. Calm in moments like this doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its voice or demand attention. It shows up quietly, almost out of place, like someone standing still in a room full of pacing bodies. That calm is what draws eyes before anyone understands why. While everyone else is reacting, he's observing, not judging, not guessing, reading. The dog's posture, their pacing, the tension in their shoulders, the sound of their breathing. Calm under extreme threat isn't the absence of fear. It's the discipline to keep fear from driving the body. That discipline is trained, repeated, burned into muscle memory long before the moment arrives. The crowd mistakes calm for indifference at first. They expect shouting, commands, force. When none of that comes, confusion sets in. Calm disrupts the rhythm of panic. It slows the tempo of the scene, and slowing things down in a fear-driven environment feels dangerous to people who are already keyed up. His body language does most of the work. No sudden movements. No squared-off stance. Weight balanced. hands visible. Everything about him says control without needing to say it out loud. Calm communicates safety to those who know how to read it and authority to those who don't understand it but feel it anyway. This kind of calm doesn't come from optimism. It comes from exposure. From having been in worse situations where panic would have gotten people killed. From learning that adrenaline is a tool, not a leader. A Navy SEAL isn't trained to feel nothing. He's trained to choose what feeling gets to speak. The dogs sense it before the crowd does. Animals read intention faster than people read words. They respond to energy, posture, consistency. The absence of threat where threat is expected interrupts their momentum. Calm doesn't challenge them head-on. It sidesteps the escalation they've been primed for. What's striking is how little he does. No grand gestures. No dramatic commands. Just presence, measured and deliberate. In a moment built on spectacle, restraint becomes its own kind of power. Calm takes the attention that chaos expects to own. The crowd starts to quiet without realizing it. Voices lower. Movement slow. Panic loses its grip when it has nothing to bounce off of. Calm acts like a wall that absorbs noise instead of amplifying it. People don't know why they're quieter. They just are. This calm isn't passive. It's active control. Every step is chosen. Every pause has purpose. He's managing space, timing, and attention all at once. Calm allows for precision. Panic makes everything sloppy. In environments where one mistake can trigger catastrophe, calm is survival. There's also confidence embedded in it, not arrogance. Confidence built on competence, not ego. He doesn't need to prove anything to the crowd. He doesn't need their approval. That independence unsettles people who are used to power being loud and performative. Under extreme threat, the body wants to speed up. Heart rate spikes. Vision narrows. Fine motor skills degrade. Calm counters that by slowing the system back down. It keeps the mind wide enough to notice details others miss. Details that matter. The contrast becomes uncomfortable. When one person remains calm, it highlights how unstable everyone else feels. Calm exposes fear without naming it. That exposure can feel threatening to a crowd that's been using fear as justification. His calm reframes the situation without a single word. It suggests that this moment is manageable, that the threat isn't absolute, that control is possible. And once that idea enters the space, the narrative the crowd built starts to crack. Calm also creates trust, even among those who don't want to give it. People instinctively follow those who appear to understand what's happening. Calm signals understanding. It says this isn't chaos, it's a problem with rules. What's happening internally is just as controlled as what's visible. Breathing regulated. Focus narrowed deliberately, not by panic. Attention placed exactly where it needs to be. Calm is maintained through constant adjustment, not stiffness. In a situation designed to provoke reaction, calm becomes defiance. It refuses to play the role assigned to it. It denies the spectacle its payoff. It turns a moment meant to be explosive into something tense, quiet, and uncertain. And that uncertainty is powerful. When fear doesn't get the response it expects, it loses momentum. When aggression isn't mirrored, it hesitates. Calm doesn't overpower the threat. It outlasts it, reshapes it, and slowly pulls control back from the edge as the crowd watches someone operate at a level they weren't prepared to understand. Control over aggression isn't about suppressing it or pretending it doesn't exist. Aggression is already in the room. It's loud, charged, and looking for release. The difference is who gets to direct it. Most people think power comes from unleashing force, from meeting threat with something bigger and harsher. Real control comes from deciding how much force is necessary and refusing to use more. The dogs are aggressive because they've been pushed there. Hunger, training, confinement, expectation. Aggression didn't appear out of nowhere. It was engineered. That matters because engineered aggression can be redirected, slowed, and unraveled if you understand the inputs that created it. Control starts with recognizing cause, not just reacting to behavior. The man doesn't try to dominate the dogs. Dominance would escalate everything. It would confirm the threat they've been conditioned to respond to. Instead, he manages space, distance, timing. He controls the interaction without trying to win it. Aggression feeds on opposition. When opposition doesn't show up the way it expects, it stutters. There's restraint in every movement. Not hesitation, restraint. Hesitation is uncertainty. Restraint is choice. He allows the aggression to exist without letting it dictate the terms. That takes confidence built on repetition, on knowing exactly how far you can go before things break. The crowd expects force because force is easy to understand. Force looks like action. Control looks like nothing is happening, which makes people uncomfortable. They want escalation because escalation feels decisive. What they're watching instead is regulation. The steady narrowing of chaos into something manageable. Aggression wants speed. It wants reaction. It wants a trigger. Control denies it all three. Movements are slow enough to be readable. Intent is consistent. Nothing sudden. Nothing erratic. The dogs are given no clear signal to attack, no spike to latch onto. This kind of control requires respect for the threat. Not fear, respect. Underestimating aggression is reckless. Overestimating it is paralyzing. Control sits in the narrow space between the two. He knows exactly what the dogs are capable of and exactly what he is capable of in response. There's also an emotional component being managed. His own aggression doesn't disappear. It's contained, focused, stored. Aggression can be useful when it's disciplined. It sharpens attention. It fuels resolve. But when it spills outward unchecked, it becomes indistinguishable from panic. By not responding with violence, he changes the emotional temperature of the scene. Aggression loses its audience. The dogs sense the lack of payoff. The crowd senses it too. The moment they expected to explode starts to stretch instead, drawn out and uncertain. Control over aggression also sends a signal to everyone watching. It says that power doesn't have to be cruel, that strength doesn't require spectacle, that restraint isn't weakness. This challenges the crowd more than any show of force would have, because it undermines the logic they use to justify being there. What's happening is a form of leadership without permission. He wasn't appointed. He didn't ask. He simply took responsibility for the moment. Control over aggression often looks like stepping into a vacuum where no one else is willing to act with clarity. The dogs begin responding not to commands, but to consistency, predictable behavior, stable presence. Aggression thrives on unpredictability. Control starves it by removing surprises. Every second that passes without escalation rewires expectations. The crowd's aggression starts turning inward. Discomfort replaces excitement. They don't know how to react to a situation that refuses to follow the script. Their own energy has nowhere to go. Control exposes how dependent aggression is on cooperation. This isn't mercy in a sentimental sense. It's practicality. Violence would solve nothing here. It would satisfy the crowd briefly and leave destruction behind. Control aims for an outcome that doesn't require cleanup, justification, or denial afterward. What makes this moment powerful isn't that aggression disappears. It's that it's held in check, redirected, contained within boundaries that weren't supposed to exist. Boundaries imposed not by shouting or weapons, but by understanding behavior well enough to guide it. In a world that often mistakes brutality for strength, control over aggression stands out as something rare and unsettling. It forces everyone watching to confront a question they'd rather avoid about why they expected violence in the first place and why they were so ready to accept it as the only possible outcome. Brutality thrives on noise. It needs volume, movement, outrage, permission. It grows stronger the more people shout, push, and perform for each other. Discipline moves the opposite way. It strips things down. It removes excess. It doesn't care how it looks to a crowd because it isn't trying to win approval. That contrast is what makes the moment so jarring. The mob believes power comes from numbers, from being loud enough that doubt can't be heard, from overwhelming the situation until it bends out of shape. Brutality feels democratic in a mob. Everyone gets a piece of the responsibility and therefore none of the guilt. Discipline isolates responsibility instead of spreading it, and that makes people uneasy. Discipline doesn't react to the crowd's energy. It ignores it. While the mob feeds on shared emotion, discipline operates on internal rules. Standards set long before the moment arrives. That's why it looks cold to people who mistake emotion for conviction. Discipline doesn't need to feel right. It needs to be right. The crowd's brutality depends on momentum. Once it starts, it has to keep moving or it risks collapsing under its own weight. Discipline interrupts that momentum simply by refusing to hurry. Slowness in a brutal environment feels like resistance. It creates friction where the mob expected compliance. Brutality simplifies everything. Good versus evil. Us versus her. Act now, think later. Discipline complicates the picture by introducing restraint, judgment, and proportion. It asks uncomfortable questions without speaking them. How much force is necessary? Who actually benefits? What happens after? The mob wants a clear ending. A release. A moment where everything spills out, and then it's over. Discipline denies that release. It stretches the moment, holds tension in place, forces everyone to sit with what they're doing instead of flushing it out through violence. There's an identity threat here too. The crowd has already defined itself by its willingness to watch, to allow, to cheer. Discipline challenges that identity without attacking it directly. It simply behaves as if the mob's rules don't apply. That quiet rejection is more destabilizing than confrontation. Brutality relies on certainty, even when that certainty is false. Discipline accepts uncertainty and operates anyway. It doesn't need the story to be clean or the outcome to be dramatic. It's comfortable working in gray areas, which is exactly where mobs feel most exposed. The presence of discipline highlights how performative the brutality is. The shouting, the threats, the exaggerated danger. All of it starts to look inflated when someone refuses to play along. What was supposed to feel powerful starts to feel desperate. Discipline also reclaims time. The mob wants everything now. Discipline understands timing. When to move. When to wait. When doing nothing is actually an action. This control over time frustrates brutality, which depends on urgency, to override conscience. The crowd's violence is fueled by shared permission. Discipline doesn't ask permission. It acts from obligation. Obligation to a code, a standard, a line that doesn't move just because other people want it to. That kind of obligation is rare, and rarity makes it threatening. As discipline holds, the mob starts fracturing internally. Some people feel exposed. Others feel foolish. A few feel angry that the moment they were promised is slipping away. Brutality doesn't know how to handle introspection. It was never built for it. Discipline shifts the power dynamic without announcing it. No takeover. No challenge. Just a quiet recentering of control. The mob realizes too late that the moment no longer belongs to them. Their role has been reduced from participants to observers of something they don't understand. What makes discipline so effective is that it doesn't mirror brutality. It doesn't validate it by responding in kind. It starves it. Without reaction, brutality loses its justification. Without escalation, it looks excessive. Without chaos, it feels naked. The contrast forces a choice on everyone watching. Not a spoken one, but an internal one. Do they continue aligning themselves with cruelty that now looks unnecessary? Or do they acknowledge that another way exists? Discipline doesn't force the answer. It just makes avoidance harder. In that clash between mob brutality and disciplined control, the illusion of inevitability breaks down. What was framed as the only possible outcome reveals itself as a preference, a choice the crowd was ready to make until someone showed them they didn't have to, and that realization spreads quietly, unsettling the space where certainty used to be, leaving people standing in the aftermath of a moment that didn't explode the way they wanted, but instead exposed something far more uncomfortable about themselves.